Eyrbyggja Saga, The Haunting at Frodis-Water. The same summer that Christ's faith was made law in Iceland, a ship came from over the sea to Snowfellness, a keel of Dublin, whose folk were Ayrsa and South Islanders, and a few Northmen. They lay off the reef long through the summer, biding a wind to sail in over the firth to Ness. So many men of the Ness went to chaffer with them. Now among her folk was a South Island woman named Thorgunna, and of her the shipmen told that she had such things among her faring goods that the like of them would be hard to get in Iceland. But when Thurid, the good wife of Frodis-Water, heard thereof, she became exceedingly wishful to see those fair things, for she was very fain of glitter and show. So she fared to the ship, and found Thorgunna, and asked if she had any women's attire, something out of the common way. She said that she had no goods for sale, but let out that she had certain fair things, which she might show without shame at feasts or other meetings of men. Thurid prayed to see her fair things, and she granted it to her, and the wares seemed good to Thurid, and exceedingly well shaped, but not beyond price. Thurid offered to deal for the goods, but Thorgunna would not sell them, so Thurid bade her come dwell with her, for she knew that Thorgunna was rich of raiment, and thought to get the goods at her leisure. Thorgunna answered, I have good will to go dwell with thee, but I give you to know that I am loath to pay much for myself, because I am exceedingly handy at work, and willing enough thereto. But no wet work will I do, and I myself too shall rule what I am to pay for myself from the wealth that I have. So Thorgunna talked it over unyieldingly enough, but Thurid would that she should go thither none the less, and her goods were borne from the ship, a great locked ark and a light chest, and they were brought to the house at Frodis-Water. So when Thorgunna came there, she prayed to have a bed, and a berth was given to her in the inward part of the hall. There she unlocked her ark, and drew thereout bedclothes, all excellently wrought. She covered over the bed with English sheets and a silken quilt, and took from the ark bed curtains and all other bed gear withal, and so good an array that was, that men deemed that of such goods they had never seen the like. Then said goodwife Thurid, Put a price for me on thy bed gear. But Thorgunna answered, Nay, I will not lie in straw for thee, courteous though thou be, and grand of array. That misliked the goodwife, and never after did she bid for the goods. Thorgunna worked at the weaving day by day when no haymaking was, but when it was dry she worked at the saving of hay in the home mead, and let make for herself a rake, which she alone must handle. Thorgunna was a woman great of growth, thick and tall and right full of flesh, dark-browed and narrow-eyed, her hair dark red and plenteous, of exceedingly good manners was she in her daily ways, and she went every day to church before she went about her work. Yet not easy of temper was she, or of many words in her daily conversation. Most men deemed that Thorgunna must have come into her 6th 10 of years, yet she was the halest of women. In those days was Thorir Woodenleg come to be harboured at Frodis-Water, and Thorgrimma Witchface his wife with him, and things went somewhat ill betwixt her and Thorgunna. Kiartan, the Goodman's son, was the one with whom Thorgunna would have the most dealings, and she loved him much, yet he was cold to her, wherefore she was often cross-grained of mood. Kiartan was by then of 13 or 14 winters, and was both great of growth and noble to look on. The summer was something wet, but nigh autumn befell good drying weather, and the haymaking at Frodis-Water was by then come so far that all the home mead was mown, and nigh half thereof was fully dry. Then befell a good drying day, calm and clear, so that no cloud was seen in the heavens. Goodman Thorod got up early in the morning and set folk a work, and some fell to carrying the hay, while others ricked it. But Thorod set the women to spreading it, and the work was shared betwixt them, and Thorgunna set to work at as much as an ox's winter fodder. But the work went on well the day long, but when it had well nigh worn 3 hours from noon, a black cloud fleck came across the heaven from the north above Score, and swiftly drew over the heavens, and thitherward straight over the stead. folk deemed that they saw rain in that cloud, and Thorod bade men rake up the hay. But Thorgunna brought hers into ridges, nor would she fall to rake it up, though she was so bidden. The cloud fleck came up swiftly, and when it stood over the homestead of Frodis-Water, there followed therewith so great a darkness, that men might not see out of their home field, or scarce their hands before them. Then fell so great a rain from the cloud, that all the hay that was spread was wetted. But the cloud drew off swiftly, and the weather cleared. Then men saw that it had rained blood in that shower. But that evening good drying weather set in again, and the blood dried off all the hay. But that which Thorgunna had spread, that dried not, or the rake either which she had handled. Thurid asked Thorgunna what she thought that wonder might forebode. She said that she wotted not. But that seems to me most like, says she, that it will be the weird of some one of those that are here. Thorgunna went home in the evening and into her berth, and put off her bloodied clothes, then lay down in her bed and sighed heavily, and men deemed that she had fallen sick. Now that shower had come nowhere else but to Frodis-Water. But Thorgunna might eat no meat that evening, but in the morning Goodman Thorod came to her, and asked her what end she looked to have of her ailing. She said that she was minded to think that she would not fall sick again. Then she said, I deem thee the wisest of men in the homestead, therefore I will tell thee all my will as to what I would have made of the goods I leave behind me and of myself. For things will go, says she, even as I say, though ye think there is little to be noted in me, and I deem it will avail but little to turn away from my behests, for things have begun in such wise that to no narrow ends deem I they will come, if strong stays not be raised thereagainst. Thorod answered and said, Methinks that there is no little likelihood that thou wilt have deemed aright about this. Yet I will promise thee, says he, not to turn from thy behests. Then said Thorgunna, This I would have done. I would be born to Skalaholt if I die of this sickness, because my mind tells me that that stead will be for one while the most worshipped stead in the land, and I wot also, says she, that there will be priests to do the singing over me, so I pray thee to bring me there, and of my goods shalt thou have so much as that thou wilt have no loss thereby. But from my undivided goods shalt Thurid have the scarlet cloak that I own, and this I do to the end that she may be content that I see to my other goods in such wise as I will. But I will that thou take for the cost thou hast for me that which thou wilt, or that which pleases her, from such things alone as I leave thereto. A gold ring I have, which shall go to church with me, but I will that my bed and bed hangings be burned up with fire, for that they will be of no good to any man. And I say this not because I grudge anyone to enjoy those good things, if I knew that they would be of good avail to any, but now I say so much thereover, says she, because I deem it ill that folk should have so much heavy trouble from me, as well I wot will be if ye turn away from me that which I now ordain. Thorod promised to do after her bidding, and so the sickness grew on her, and after that Thorgunna lay there not many days before she died. The corpse was first borne into the church there, and Thorod let make a chest for the corpse, and the next day he had the bedgear borne out into the air, and brought faggots together, and let her pile up a bonfire there beside. Then goodwife Thurid went to him, and asked what he minded to do with the bedgear. He said that he would burn it up with fire, even as Thorgunna had charged. She answered, It mislikes me that such precious things should be burned. Thorod said, She spake much thereon, and how it would not do to turn aside from that which she had laid down. Thurid said, Such words were of naught but her envious mind. She grudged that any should enjoy these, therefore she did lay such a charge on thee. But naught ill-omened will come of it, in whatsoever way such things are departed from. I know not, said he, that things will go well, but if we do as she has bidden. Then Thurid put her arms round his neck, and prayed him not to burn the bedgear, and pressed him so eagerly that he changed his mind, and he brought matters about in such wise that Thorod burned the bolster and the mattress, but she took to her the quilts and sheets and all the hangings, and yet withal it misliked them both. Thereafter was the burial journey got ready, and trusty men got up to go with the corpse, and good horses that Thorod owned. The body was swathed in linen, but not sewn up, and there laid in the chest. So then that they went south over the heath as the road lies, and naught is told of their journey till they came south past Valbjorn's vales. There they got amongst floes exceeding soft, and the corpse was often upset. There they went south to Northwater, and crossed it by Eylfrid. Deep was the river, and a storm befell with much rain, but they came at last to a stead that was within Staffholt's tongue, and is called Netherness, and there asked for guesting. But the bonder would give them no cheer, so whereas the night was at hand, they deemed they might go no further, for belike it was not easy to deal with Whitewater by night. So they unloaded their horses, and bore the corpse into a house over against the outer door, and then went into the hall, and did offer their clothes, and deemed that they would abide there unfed that night. But the home men went to bed by daylight, and when they were abed they heard a great clatter in the buttery. And so they went to see what was toward, if perchance thieves had not broken in there. And when they came to the buttery, there was to behold a tall woman, naked, with nothing on her, busied at bringing out victuals. So when they saw her, they were so afeard that they durst go nowhere anigh. But when the corpse-bearers knew thereof, they went there, and saw what was toward, that thither was Thorgunna come. And a good it seemed to all not to meddle with her. So when she had wrought such things there as she would, and bore meat into the hall, and laid the table, and set out meat thereon, then spake the corpse-bearers to the bonder, Maybe things will end, so or ever we part, that thou wilt deem that thou hast paid dear enough for not giving us any cheer. Then said the goodman and goodwife, We will surely give you meat, and do for you all other things that ye may need. And forthwith, when the goodman had bidden them good cheer, Thorgunna went out of the hall and out of doors, and was not seen after. And after that, light was brought into the hall, and the wet clothes pulled off from the guests, and dry clothes got them in their stead, and they went to table and crossed their meat, while the goodman had all the house besprinkled with holy water. So the guests eat the meat, and none had harmed therefrom, though Thorgunna had set it out. There they slept through the night, or in a most hospitable place belike. But in the morning they got them ready for their journey, and right well it sped with them. But wheresoever these haps were known, there it seemed to best rede to most folk to give them all cheer they stood in need of. So after this, naught befell to tell of in their journey, and when they came to Scalaholt, the good things were yielded up which Thorgunna had given thereto, and the priest took them, corpse and all, gladly enow. And there was Thorgunna laid in earth. But the corpse-bearers fared home, and all went well with their journey, and they all came home in good case. At Frodis-Water there was a great fire hall, and lock-beds in therefrom, as the wont then was. Out from the hall there were 2 butteries, one on either hand, with stockfish stored in one, and meal in the other. There were meal fires made every evening in the fire hall, as the wont was, and men mostly sat thereby, or ever they went to meat. Now that same night that the corpse-bearers came home, as men sat by the meal fires at Frodis-Water, they saw how by the panelling of the house wall was come a half moon, and all might see it who were in the house. And it went backward and withershins round about the house, nor did it vanish away while folk sat by the fires. So Thorod asked Thorir Wooden Leg what that might abode. Thorir said it was the moon of Weird, and the deaths of men will follow thereafter, says he. So a whole week this thing endured, that the moon of Weird came in there evening after evening. This happened next to tell of at Frodis-Water, that the shepherd came in exceedingly hushed. Little he said, and what he said was peevish, so men deemed it most like that he was bewitched, for he had fared in distraught wise, and was ever talking to himself, and so things went on a while. But when 2 weeks of winter were worn, the shepherd came home on a night, went straight to his bed and lay down, and in the morning, when men came to him, he was dead. So he was buried at the church there. A little after that, great hauntings befell, And on a night, as Thorir Wooden Leg went out for his needs, and turned off aside from the door where he would go in again, he saw how the shepherd was come before the door. Then would he go in again, but the shepherd would nowise have it so, and Thorir was fain to get away. But the shepherd went at him, and got a hold of him, and cast him homeward up against the door. At this he was affrighted exceedingly, yet he got him to his bed, and he was by then grown coal blue all over. Now from this he fell sick and died, and was buried there at the church. But even after there were twain, the shepherd and Thorir Wooden Leg, seen in company, and therefrom were folk full of dread, as was like to be. After Thorir's death, a housecarl of Thorod fell sick, and lay there 3 nights, or ever he died. Then one after another died, till 6 were dead, and by then it was hard on the Yule fast, though at that time there was no fasting in Iceland. Now the pile of stockfish was so heaped up in the buttery that it filled it up, so that the door might not be opened, and it went right up to the tie-beam, and a ladder was needed to get the stockfish from the top. So one evening when men sat by the meal fires, they heard how the stockfish was being riven out of its skin. But when men looked thereto, they found naught quick. But in the winter, a little before Yule, Goodman Thorod went out to Ness after his stockfish. They were 6 together in a 10-oar boat, and went out there night long. That same evening that Thorod went from home, it fell out at Frodis-Water, when the meal fires were lighted and men came gathering into the hall, that they saw how a seal's head came up through the floor of the fire-hole. A certain home woman came forth first and saw that hap, and caught up a club that lay in the doorway, and drave it at the seal's head. But it rose up under the blow, and glared up at Thorgunna's bed gear. Then went a housecarl thereto, and beat on the seal, but at every blow it kept rising, till it was up as far below the flappers. Then fell the housecarl swooning, and all that were thereby were fulfilled of mighty dread. Then the swain Kiartan ran thereto, and took up a great sledgehammer, and smote it on the seal's head, and great was that blow. But the seal only shook its head and looked round about. But Kiartan smote one blow on another, till the seal sank down therewith, as if he were at the knocking down of a peg. But he smote on till the seal went down so far that he might beat down the floor over the head of him. And so indeed it fell out the winter through, that all the portents dreaded Kiartan the most of all. The morning that Thorod and his men went out west away from Ness, they were all lost off Any. The ship and the fish drave ashore there under Any, but the corpses were not found. When this news was known at Frodis-Water, Kiartan and Thurid bade their neighbours to the Arvale, and their Yule ale was taken and used for the Arvale. But the first evening, when as men were at the feast, and were come to their seats, in came Goodman Thorod and his fellows into the hall, all of them dripping wet. Men gave good welcome to Thorod, for good portent it was deemed, since folk held it forsooth that those men should have good cheer of ran if they who had been drowned at sea came to their own burial ale. For in those days little of the olden law was cast aside, though men were baptized and were Christian by name. Now Thorod and his company went down to the endlong sitting hall, which was double-doored, and went into the fire-hall, and took no man's greeting, and set them down by the fire. Then the homen fled away from the fire-hall, but Thorod and his folk sat behind there till the fires slaked, and then gat them gone. And thus it befell every evening, while the Arvale lasted, that they came to the fire. Much talk was here over at the Arvale, and some guessed that it would leave off when the feast was over. The guests went home after the feast, and somewhat dreary was the household left. Now the evening that the guests went away were meal fires made, as wont was. But when they burned up, in came Thorod and his company, all dripping wet. And they sat down by the fire, and fell to wringing their raiment. So when they were sat down, in came Thorir Wooden Leg and his 6 followers, and they were all bemouldered, and they shook their raiment, and cast the mould at Thorod and his folk, Then the home men fled away from the fire hall as might look before, and had neither light nor warm stones, nor any matter wherewith that they had any avail of the fire. But the evening next after were fires made in another chamber, and it was deemed that they would be less likely to come thither. But it fell not out so, and all went in the same way as the night before, and both companies came to the fires. The third evening Kiartan gave counsel to make a long fire in the fire hall, and meal fires in another chamber. So it was done, and this availed thus much, that Thorod and his folk sat by the long fire, and the home men by the little fire, and so things went till over Yuletide. Now it befell that more and more were things going on in the stockfish heap, and night and day men might hear how the stockfish was torn. And after this the time came when need was of stockfish, and men went to search the heap. And the man who went up thereon saw this to tell of, that up from the heap came a great tail as big as a singed ox tail, and it was short-haired and seal-haired. He who went up onto the heap caught at the tail and tugged, and called on other men to come help him. So folk fared up the heap, both men and women, and tugged at the tail, and got naught done, and they thought none otherwise than the tail was dead. But lo, as they pulled, the tail drew down through their hands, so that the skin came off the palms of those who had the firmest hold thereon, and naught was known afterwards of that tail. Then was the stockfish heap taken down, and every fish therein was found torn from the skin, so that there was no fish found in his skin in the lower part of the heap, but naught quick was found therein. After these haps, Thorgunna Witchface, the wife of Thorir Woodenleg, fell sick, and lay but a little while or she died, and the very same evening that she was buried, she was seen in the company of Thorir her husband. Then the sickness fell on folk anew after the tale was seen, and more women than men died, and yet 6 men died in that brunt. But some fled before those hauntings and ghosts. At harvest-tide there had been 30 serving folk there, but 18 were dead, 5 fled away, and but 7 left behind at Goy. Now when those wonders had gone so far, one day Kiartan went east unto Holyfell to go and see Snorri the priest, his mother's brother, and asked rede of him what he should do in the matter of those wonders that had fallen on them. At that time was come to Holyfell the priest that Gizur the White had sent to Snorri the priest. So Snorri sent the priest out to Frodis-Water with Kiartan, as well as his son Thord Cowsey, and 6 men more. Thereto he added counsel to burn Thorgunna's bedgear, and summon all those who walked to a door-doom. And he bade the priest sing the hours there, and hallow water, and shrive all folk. And so these summoned men from the nighest steads on the road, and came to Frodis-Water on the eve of Candlemas, at such time as the meal fires were lighted. By then had goodwife Thurid fallen sick, even in such wise as those who had died. Now Kiartan went in straight away, and saw how Thorod and his folk sat by the fire, as their wont was. So he took down Thorgunna's bedgear, and went into the fire hall, and caught up brands from the fire, and went out therewith. And then was all the bed array burned that Thorgunna had owned. Thereafter Kiartan summoned Thorir Woodenleg, and Thord Cowsey summoned Goodman Thorod, in that they went about the house with leave, and despoiled men of both life and luck. All were summoned who sat by the fires. Then was a door-doom named, these cases put forward, and it was done in all matters, even as at a doom of the thing. Verdicts were delivered, cases summed up, and doom given. But as such as the sentence on Thorir Woodenleg was given out, he arose and said, "Here have I sat, while sit I might." And thereafter he went out by the door, before which the court was not set. Then was the sentence on the shepherd passed. But when he heard it, he stood up and said, "Go I now hence from. I ween erst it had more seemly been." And when Thorgunna Witchface heard the doom on her ended, She also arose and said,
Here, while abiding, was meet I abode.
Then they charged one after the other, and each arose as the sentence fell on him, and all said somewhat at their going forth, but ever it seemed by the words of each that they were all loath to depart. At last was judgment given on Goodman Thorod, for when he heard it, he stood up and said,
Meseems little peace is here, so get us all gone otherwhere.
And therewith he went out. Then in walked Kiartan and his folk, and the priest bare hallowed water, and all the holy things throughout the house, and on the next day they sang all the hours and mass with great solemnity, so that there was an end thereafter to all walkings and hauntings at Frodis-Water. But Thurid got better of her sickness, so that she was healed. In the spring after these wonders, Kiartan took to him serving folk, and dwelt long at Frodis-Water, and was the greatest of the doughty.